You talk about predictable outcomes, but we need to embrace that if we have one study and then the answer changes in 3 months, yes, that might be frustrating for the business, but there's a reason for that. As long as you can rule out methodological reasons or inconsistencies with data, which is typically not the case, there's an underlying canary in a coal mine here that is actually probably influencing or triggering an emerging trend. That means if we can be agile and adjust, we can actually hit it fast. I see it as less of an inertia and more of an opportunity.
Welcome back
to another episode of the Innovate On Purpose podcast. Hosted by Matt Mueller,
best-selling author of The Mindful Innovator and Rethink Retail's top retail expert.
We can help retail leaders find clarity so they can grow their businesses purposefully.
We will uncover mindful tips, innovative solutions, and purposeful leadership advice and strategies that you can apply immediately to your retail innovation. Are you ready to innovate on purpose?
Hey, before we jump into the episode today, I just wanted to say thank you for hitting the play button. You being here fires me up, and I cannot wait to share with you the insights that are going to make a difference in your business. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a review so I can reach as many retail leaders as possible. They too need to hear this. Okay, let's do it. Hello and welcome to Innovate On Purpose. Today we are going to be speaking about consumer insights and how do we prioritize innovation workloads. When I first started on the innovation team, it was a huge challenge for us. We had an insights team, the innovation team working on strategy and trying to figure out exactly how we chase all these things down, all the different priorities that we have and all those pivots that we experience in our world. So today we are going to be speaking with a very special guest. His name is Tucker Mitchell. He is from Pernod Ricard and he is a senior manager of innovation insights and a strategy lead there. Tucker, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so awesome to have you. Before we jump into the episode, can you just give us a quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Tucker Mitchell. I work in the consumer insights world. I've been in the consumer insights and strategy world for about 9 or 10 years or so. I, like a lot of people, came about it from maybe a slightly different angle. I started off in undergraduate school studying psychology and economics. Initially thought I might actually go into counseling or school counseling, or there was even a couple of moments where I thought I might go into med school and look into psychiatry because I've always been fascinated by people's behavior and really the why behind people and why they do certain things, and in a lot of ways why it's irrational and why it's hard to predict what people do and sometimes some of those contradictions. Ended up finding so many pathways and similarities in what I was learning in psychology with macro and microeconomics, studies of behavior, trying to predict decision-making, and ended up moving into a career in market research. Had a initial consulting role with the MAPS Group Marketing and Planning Systems, which is now part of Kantar Analytics, working in strategic quantitative work first. When I graduated school for about 3 or 4 years, and then I moved to the brand side. I have a family history in the food and beverage industry, as well as specialty foods and the importing world. So I knew I wanted to be in the food and beverage world specifically. So I've hopped around to a couple different places. I started in quick service restaurants at Dunkin' Brands, working in brand strategy insights for Dunkin', then moved over to CPG, classic center aisle with Welch's Juice, working and stood up their innovation incubator. And then recently, a little less than a year ago, took the job leading innovation insights and strategy at Pernod Ricard in the beverage alcohol space.
That's an awesome background. I love how robust that is and all the different directions you've taken, because it really does bring a lot of just great traits and attributes from each of those types of roles into the role that you're currently in. Going from potentially child counselor to alcoholic beverage leader is a very interesting kind of path when you look at the A to Z. But so cool.
Bit of a pivot. Yeah, I do still volunteer in that space, and I help out with as much as I can. The mental health world is extremely important to me, and more in the lexicon of the world in the U.S. today. But working in the food and beverage space and getting to study people is a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's definitely my favorite 2 spots too, is that studying people. I love I was in sociology when I was in college, and I just loved people watching and trying to understand exactly the behaviors of people and why they do the things they do. And of course, always been in the food business myself, so always was very attracted to that and love that I've been able to combine the two as well. But food and beverage, absolutely my favorite space. Beverage has been such an interesting category to watch over the last 10 years or so, just because of the growth that's there and how it's just evolving. I'm curious, like 2025 just began. Like, what are you most excited about in the beverage industry this year?
It's a great question. And I've had the pleasure of working with a couple different aspects of beverages, first on kind of the on-the-go coffee side and kind of quick pick-me-up in the afternoon, and all the way to juice, and now the beverage alcohol space. I think this might be an interesting perspective, but what makes me really excited is the contradictory way that consumers are drinking beverages today. I love when people don't make sense. And I know that's not always the thing that business leaders like to hear, but we don't make sense by nature. We're not consistent. We're not always predictable. And sometimes studies that we get and data that we read in one study may completely differ from another, and we have to try to reconcile what might have changed. But for me, I love seeing the tension of health and wellness as well as treating oneself. You see that across beverage alcohol. You see that across coffee with sweeter drinks. Starbucks is now leaning a bit more, for example, towards the coffee craft since their new CEO came in and trying to move towards the cortado. So there's this tension of, for some occasions, you have this fragmentation of needs where, earlier in the week, you might license yourself to say you're going to lighten up on the sugar or lighten up on a few things. But by the end of the week, you're really going to treat yourself, and understanding what crosses the boundary to become worth it is something that I find fascinating.
We're not like that linear. Human beings, we're very, very deep, and we make different decisions based on different things. And yeah, absolutely, like 95% of our decisions that we make are subconscious. They're in the irrational. But it is cool to see the contrast of everyone's going health and wellness, but at the same time, they also want indulgence. And when do you pull those triggers is very interesting to see exactly what we're going to be doing. For me personally, looking at the beverage space this year, I'm super excited about looking deeper into functional beverage. It's been growing constantly. Just what can we get from our beverages more than just that indulgence, right? But what can it do for us? Can it bring us focus? Can it bring us energy? It's really interesting to see how far it's going to, even now where I just met with this one brand where they're focusing in on collagen water for skincare. So it's like one of the first women functional beverages that are breaking out. So really interesting space. So Tucker, going into the consumer insights part of the job that you work with, how does that play a role in an organization like Pernod Ricard? How does consumer insights fit the big picture?
It's critical. I would say I like to call it the oxygen to the plan, if you will. Without it, we're not linking our strategy to the actual consumer and understanding whether it will fit into lifestyles and whether, we're timely enough with certain launches that we're considering. If, for example, it's something that a competitor has launched or a trend like functional beverages that might start to get saturated in the market. But at the same time, it's something we need to balance in terms of speed to market, which is critical because, even someone like myself who manages a number of different research tasks across quantitative and qualitative across 6 to 10 brands, it's not as if I want or feel like every product that we're working on needs the same level of learning plan or rigor, depending on the ambition that it's going to bring to the business. So it's absolutely critical, but it's also my job to help our organizations understand when we might have enough already and when we actually, on the other side, may have not really cracked that human insight that isn't always easily found. It's something that you kind of have to mine and chip away at in order to really find that evocative statement that excites a product innovation team or excites our creative teams if you're working in communication. So it's a trick balance, but it's always there. We have a wonderful suite of tools that we use. Some are quick turns, some are very rigorous. I love the foundational work when we really get into homes with people, bring them to bars and start actually making cocktails with them and understand, instead of self-stated responses, what are they actually doing in the moment? Because that's going to be the most accurate representation of their emotions. But it's critical. It's always just striking that balance of, when do we not need more testing? And when do we actually need to slow down and say, I don't know if we've cracked this yet. We need to slow down and really go back to the consumer and their occasions to really make sure we understand that strong motivator.
It's what are some of those currents that you have to read to really determine whether you need to go deeper or not? When do you know enough is enough?
It's a great question. I think it tends to be part the way we look at things in terms of what they might deliver to the business. If something is maybe a limited time offer or a promotional strategy or a PR play with a co-branding or with a celebrity, those things might not need the same rigor in a learning plan as, an entirely new format that's first to market. I think you can also read the results of certain pre-testing work that we do to understand we might be close, but we might have not completely cracked the differentiation and how to really sell this into our, our retail customers and our e-commerce customers in terms of the uniqueness or how it really fits into lifestyles, or maybe we need to pick a lane in terms of how we want to suggest people just consume it. Maybe we're kind of torn between something that we want to be consumed neat on the rocks or maybe in a cocktail serve, and we need to kind of make some strategic choices to place a bet. So it's a bit of art and science, as a lot of things are in strategy, as you know, Matt. But I think it has to do with kind of the prioritization, first of all, and how quickly we need to move, but also kind of reading the tea leaves of those initial moments from consumers and understanding, the full proposition and that positioning. And if we feel like we have that story together, do we know our frame of reference and what other things out there or nothing can we compare this to? What is our clear point of difference? What is our clear job to be done? And kind of writing that down. And if we can fill out that framework or something like that thoroughly without question, we should be good to go.
That's awesome. I love that you guys are thinking about it that way. A lot of times, like teams are striving for perfection. I mean, well, you just need progress, right? You just need to get enough data to get you moving into that next the next iteration of the product. And you can always iterate, right? Even if it's in market, you can still iterate on it.
Yeah. And if there's a worksheet that I work with my stakeholders on and the innovation team at Pernod, if they say, well, we're not 100% certain on every bucket that we're maybe filling in here, there might be times that I say, I think we're okay. I think we can pull this together from other work. We don't need to go out and collect new data on this. We have existing work that can help us answer this. There's trends, there's foresight, there's understanding the role of some of the brands in our portfolio and how they fit together, across brands like Jameson whiskey versus an Absolut vodka from Sweden. They have, different goals and objectives, as you can imagine. So sometimes we have all that we need, and we might need to mine some existing work as well and balancing out when we need to go out and collect new information from consumers versus using secondary work.
Yeah. So that kind of leads into like the next part of this conversation, which is like innovation overload. Like, so you're taking insights and direction from different parts of the organization, from operations, marketing, all these different channels, the innovation team that you have as well. How do you prioritize like where you and your team spend time? Like, how do you prioritize all of that?
Yeah, I think ultimately we work with our leadership to try to set things up in a clear kind of what is the role that this initiative may play in the portfolio towards achieving larger brand goals, right? That are set up by our brand management team, by our marketing leadership, et cetera, that we work on and then understand where we want to grow, how close some of those growth targets may be. I think there's also, sometimes some strategic trade-offs you need to make if there's something that happens in the marketplace that warrants that we move faster on something. So let's say there's an idea or a flavor or a construct that we're working on that maybe something else similar to what we're working on that hasn't launched yet comes out in the market. We might need to be agile and reevaluate. Do we need to change some of the features? Do we need to try to accelerate the growth on this in order to make sure that we're not as late to the market if there's a smaller brand or a larger brand kind of doing it and they might not beat us to the punch? So it's a constantly evolving. I think we try at the beginning of our years to set up our like a tiered system of what are our big bets, what are more medium tiers, and helps us allocate resources, time, and also rigor. But we have to be agile because, we need to show progress with our leadership and continuing to get that buy-in to get towards that self-story for customers. And then, consumers and marketplaces change all the time. So it's something we reevaluate monthly as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah, definitely. Markets are always changing, evolving, and it's important to make sure that we're always keeping our finger on the pulse and evolving with it.
Yep. I think the other thing that we keep an eye on is the business performance, right? And the role that innovation is just one small aspect to drive brand growth, right? As part of the broader marketing funnel and the overall initiatives and brand growth strategy and pricing and all the other things that can drive growth. Innovation is a part. It might serve a larger role for some brands that is set down as a strategic guidepost from our leadership than others. That certainly helps if they identify that, innovation is going to be a critical part of the growth for this brand for the next 4 to 5 years. That's exceptional to know because we can understand that at the beginning of a year, but then we need to be reactive to what happens in the market and in the industry to know if things need to be moved up in order to help support the business as well.
Thinking about having to continually just making sure that you have your finger on the pulse and moving the business forward, looking at those performance figures and having to go and collect these insights and, and gather. When you think about like stakeholder alignment, like you have one leader that may be really focused in on one particular brand, another leader that has a completely different focus. Like, how do you gain alignment based off of the insights that you're finding, right? So how do you get them on board? What kind of strategies and tips can you provide?
Yeah. Before I go into that, I'll build on one thing you said in terms of collecting insights. We talk about this on our team a lot. I'd like to say that we collect learnings, but we generate and we develop the insights, right? an insight is not something that is necessarily going to come out of a survey crosstab, if you will, or a qualitative interview. It is something that we need to then bring to life with the voice of the consumer and the voice of our strategy to really light a fire under our stakeholders to understand how this can inspire action. So, that's and also kind of the delineation and kind of classical market research versus what we say is an insight and truly kind of groundbreaking and an aha moment. Not every survey that we go out is going to develop those, but as we go and we triangulate across sources, we find those amazing moments, and then they become the root of a lot of our strategy. To your point on stakeholder alignment, I'm sure you hear about it a lot, but storytelling is critical. We work with both quantitative and qualitative data, crossing things like surveys, big data analytics and segmentation, and also one-on-one interviews, focus groups, going into homes, shop-alongs, cook-alongs, cocktail-alongs, anything that you might think of to bring it to life. So we need to be the stewards of the story. So not only the voice of the consumer, but the stewards of that story, how we communicate that out to make sure that our leadership is not overwhelmed with what we're learning. So it's very clear what the objectives are, and then understanding how do we kind of structure that story in a way that collects buy-in immediately, focuses on the so what do I need to know? How worried should I be? And then what action should I take? But also building some tension, just like any story or writer or author, being able to create some tension and release in order to pull people in and then drive that impact. I think if it's not a memorable work and the presentations are very data heavy or very table heavy or compendiums, if you will, they're not going to drive impact. We really need to be the stewards of that. And then we have internal checkpoints that are established by organization. And many organizations have this. They're all different at different places, that as opposed to the readout or share out of the results of one study, there are internal meetings for decision points that bring cross-functional leaders across the entire business together to make decisions, to make sure we've met minimum viability thresholds. And then there's, of course, ad hoc meetings when things go awry and you need to make sure you can find a way to move forward.
Yeah, all great insights and tips to provide. The storytelling aspect is something that is completely, I thought was completely, I guess I was underrating it at one point, in my career. And just, when you start to get good at telling those stories and crafting the reason why they should care, and to get that buy-in, it is so important. And I remember when I first had the CEO of a major grocery store come into our office to sell them on a concept that we were working on. The first time we were into the office, we showed him the data and said, hey, this is the data. This is what's happening in store. We really need to do this instead of what we're doing currently. Well, let's change this program around. And he was like, okay, yeah, sure, we can do that. Left the meeting. Needless to say, when we left, nothing changed. He said, okay, but then it completely got forgotten about. He didn't even remember making that decision because it was just so not memorable. And then a year later, we had another meeting with him and he came back into the office and we said, okay, well let's do it this way. Let's craft a story. Let's start to show them the voice of the consumer. And we started to show them the same data points that we had, but then said, hey, and this is what the consumer is saying about it. And we actually showed videos of the consumer right there in the room. And all of a sudden there was an understanding and it clicked. Oh my gosh, yes, we are losing money by not doing this. We have to change the way that we're serving our customers. We need to evolve with them. And it wasn't until we were able to really paint that picture with the voice of the consumer and doing it in creative ways with video, with doing it with, we actually had a fake grocery store built up. And we walked him through the fake grocery store just to paint the picture and tell the story even better. But after that, next thing you know, he's all on board. He remembered the story and was, executing with us. It became our partner. We got him aligned.
Question. Some of those tactics, as you can imagine, are also sometimes a double-edged sword if they're case studies that might not be representative of the actual larger truth in terms of the large group of people you're trying to represent. So you have to be selective in who you're bringing in. But yeah, I like to structure things with what's the context first? What's the business context? Why are we going out and learning this in the first place? What did we learn? I always think of it a three-pronged approach, and I work with my team. What did we learn? How do we demonstrate that we know this, right? And that's where data comes in, right? And it doesn't have to be 20 slides. It does not need to be an appendix. As long as it's very clear that we can demonstrate how we know it, we immediately can spend the time working in person with our leaders, less on the how we got there and more on now what do we do? And that's where we use our time more efficiently. And I find that sometimes people can get more stuck in that stage two, where they start with their stage two and then end with one and then have no time to talk about strategic action. I try to work with all my deliverables, not only on that context and actually what decision are they going to be made and what are the implications of that across our supply chain team, our operations team, our commercial team? What does that mean for the restaurant business, for the off-premise and retail business. But if you can focus on the context and the so what, and spend a little bit of time on the demonstration, and this is coming from someone who loves quantitative work still, you can spend a lot more time driving your business.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the blend of it all. And like with that study that I was mentioning, it was doing the quant study and realizing, so this is in the deli business, and saying, well, that when a line was 5 minutes or longer in the deli, you're more likely to leave and lose a sale from that person. And we had massive data, showing that this was a fact. And great, but it was like bringing a couple of consumers in to then talk about that particular moment of this deli blow by, like when they actually, I decide to leave at this point because I got way too much going on. This is what's happening in my life. And we're able to paint the backstory to it. Now we just took that one major key point and brought it to life. But you have to have a purpose when you're thinking about that, the qualitative piece of it, and building that story. Otherwise, you can spend all day. I love spending time with consumers and learning about their behavior. We'd have to be more purposeful about that, for sure. Thinking about other consumer insights professionals that are out there, what advice would you give them to help them really just be able to create more predictable outcomes? So say, this product is supposed to be generating more sales for us. If this product is supposed to be creating new consumers for us, whatever the outcome may be. But how do you get a brand to be more predictable on those outcomes? And on
I have two answers.
Efforts?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I have two answers. One's a little bit more by the book, and then one's a little bit more of a passion point for me. So I'll give you both of them. The first I would say would be, you need to go beyond consumer groups. Like if you go beyond consumer groups, or if you're stuck with looking at targeting by demographic groups or behavioral groups only, you're stuck, because people are so different, even within some of the, one or two step categorizations that we might make about groups. They're way overgeneralized often, and we're not bringing them to life in the way that represents the unique consumer needs. So what I always try to do is look for the intersection of the consumer target, the occasion, and the brand strategy to really understand that need. If it's not rooted in the actual need and how it fits into the consumer's lifestyles, you may not find that the result is going to be driven in the way that you might like. If you're just saying, well, I want to target this group. Well, in what moment? This group buys a lot of different brands. They buy a lot of different categories. They buy a lot of alcohol substitutes now. They substitute with a lot of things. So you need to keep going deeper. It's kind of like psychological laddering to understand, okay, if it's this group, in what moment, for what reason, who are they going to be with? Paint a picture. And if you can tell a story and write a, one-page postcard, like you're that person, you're gold, because you know that those people exist. You can size that market with different tools. But if you're trying to be too high level and understanding kind of just the subgroup cuts, you're likely muddling the water. And then understanding the deeper you get, you might not be driving as broad of a penetration for a new product or household penetration, but you might be able to drive a ton of velocity and turns among a small but mighty group of passionate followers. So it's about kind of making those trade-offs in terms of targeting. The other, I would say, in terms of a consumer learning plan, which might get me in trouble, but I'll continue to put it forward, is to embrace variance. You talk about predictable outcomes, but we need to embrace that if we have one study and then the answer changes in 3 months, yes, that might be frustrating for the business, but there's a reason for that. As long as you can rule out methodological reasons or inconsistencies with data and things like that, which is typically not the case, there's an underlying canary in a coal mine here that is actually probably influencing or triggering an emerging trend. That means if we can be agile and adjust, we can actually hit it fast. And it's less of I see it as less of an inertia and more of an opportunity. So being willing to embrace a bit of that, what may appear to be misalignment between sources if it happens. Obviously, it's fantastic if you have a learning plan where the funnel continues to build and narrow. But if there is a pivot and you understand that that's something that could be replicated and it's not just kind of random chance, there's something there that needs to be studied and warrants your attention, because it could be the difference between beating competitors to something and being ahead of the curve and being a fast follower.
That's awesome, Tucker. To me, it sounds a lot like mindful innovation. It is, being very aware of what's happening and being okay with changing your direction based off of the things that you're seeing. It's so important to be in tune and always to be looking at, reading the tea leaves and be looking at the present moment to figure out, okay, should I be pivoting my direction to really take advantage? Because if you're able to do that and course correct faster than the competition, that's a big win for the brand. For sure.
No question. And it's our job as insights and strategists to try to help them identify, and our stakeholders identify, when is the right window of opportunity to take a step back. hey, if the business needs something, if we've committed to something on a calendar, if it's already in the midst of commercialization, it's probably not the moment to pump the brakes. We probably need to see this through and then maybe think about the longevity of that as opposed to reinventing the wheel. But if we're earlier in the stage and we're still narrowing down based on different options, and maybe our hypothesis wasn't met in something a bit different than we expected to be a leader was, or we see some completely unexpected work, it's our job and it's my job to tell our team, don't get frustrated. This is an opportunity to really identify something that might be unmet, that does not seem to be satisfied by other brands and other competitors. And if I can help them reframe that, maybe initial frustration with having a project that's ready to launch to, we might be able to go even bigger than we initially thought, then I'm doing my job right.
Absolutely. And Tucker, I want to put you on the spot. I want to ask you one more question. And if you can answer it, that'd be awesome. So thinking about last year at Pernod Ricard, what was your favorite product launch? And what was the insight that brought that to life?
It's a great question. I think one thing that I've gotten particularly excited about that launched this last holiday season was a new expression of the Kahlua coffee liqueur called Kahlua Chocolate Sips, venturing the Kahlua coffee liqueur brand, which is obviously having a wonderful moment right now with espresso martinis across the country and across the world, into more of an indulgent space, to not only have that moment of mixing with the core Kahlua to, show a little bit of sophistication, start the energy with an espresso martini, either at a brunch or at the beginning of an eating out or at a dinner, but to move it into more of a playful treat space where, you can also have a very convenient product where these chocolate sips are cream-based liqueurs that are, in a sense, chill or pour over ice with wonderful chocolate and white chocolate flavors available that fit the needs of consumers not always having time to build cocktails from scratch, but also needing a bit of a reward, especially as they get towards the end of a week or the end of a long month. We like to say in some of my previous roles, we're all an angel at the beginning of the week and a devil by the end, or we're an angel in January and we're a devil by December. I certainly think that that's the case for trends in terms of beverages with syrups and things like that in the Dunkin' world, but also people's apartments start to get a little bit more cluttered as the week goes along and we all stay busy. So people need convenient options that they can pull out of their fridge that's cocktail quality. But in this case, it's also something you can use as an ingredient. It's not just a ready to serve, a premixed cocktail. It's a liqueur that can be used and served neat or done whenever you need that little reward or treat for something that you got through.
I love that's a great insight and definitely a great output from the insight. So just, it's so true that consumers do want those opportunities to have that indulgence, to have that kind of release just whenever they feel like they need to have it and can have something that's conveniently there for them. Super, super big win. That's awesome.
It's been fun and it's out there now. So everybody go out and check the Kahlua Chocolate Sips out at your local stores, especially trying to hype onto the kind of the large trend of cold coffee. People in the coffee world in the US, leaning into cold brews, iced lattes. This is a great opportunity to have a nice cold coffee with a twist.
Totally. Got my coffee right here, maybe with Kahlua in it. I don't know. We're recording this on Friday after 5:00, I swear.
Yeah.
Well, Tucker, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. It's been a great conversation. Definitely could talk insights all day with you. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks, Matt. I love your work and I love the perspective you give to taking a step back and looking at the big picture. So appreciate you being on.
No, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
We have made it to the end of another episode. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of things before you go. If you have found value in this episode, I am sure you'll find value in what we have coming up. So please subscribe so you will have access and know when we launch the next episode. Also, leave a review. The more reviews we have, the further our reach becomes, and I truly want this to be heard by as many leaders as possible. Don't hog this all for yourself. I would love to hear your insights on this topic, so meet me on social media at Matt Mueller Innovation on LinkedIn and Instagram. And lastly, if you want to learn more about my story and what I can do for you and your company, go to themindfulinnovator.com. I would love to help you innovate on purpose. Until next time, just remember, bring a level of awareness to each conversation, each observation, each moment, and you can create great change in this world. Thank you.